Hey kids, let's jump in and talk about Screwtape Letter 7. And this one, the demons are kind of talking about our belief or not in them. Whether we truly believe that a spiritual world and demons exist. Obviously, it works great for them if we don't believe at all in their existence, because that way they can just work and do whatever they want, because obviously if you don't believe in something, you're not going to pay any attention to it. So that kind of gives them a lot of freedom to do their thing. um, Also, though, they talk about too that in some ways, if we do believe in them, but in certain ways, which I'll explain in a minute, that works for them too. And what comes up in this letter is a fairly well-known classic terminology of C.S. Lewis in his writings here, and it's called the Materialist Magician. And the demons talk about here that the best state for human beings would be to be a materialist magician. So, what in the world does that mean? Well, I did a little bit of breaking that down and even went to the dictionary a little bit to see if I could figure out what that means. So let's kind of take it in two parts. So materialist, they'd like for us to be a materialist, the demons would. And that means a materialist is someone who must see it to believe it. These are maybe very scientific type people who, if you can't see it, touch it, feel it, measure it, it doesn't exist. Now, make sure to say there's nothing wrong with science. We need science. Science is a wonderful, wonderful thing, in my opinion, as long as we know that God was the creator of all science. Then there's nothing wrong with science. So I'm not bashing science here, but that's the kind of thinking that a certain group of people use when they're thinking about the fact that, well, if I can't see, hear, touch, feel, prove that there's demons, then there must not be. So obviously, again, that works for demons. The other kind of end of the spectrum on that are people that are the magician part. Now, these people, they do believe in demons and a spirit world, but more for entertainment value. More for it's kind of fun to think about UFOs and little green men from Mars and ghosts and all those things, which is kind of a distorted way of thinking about spirits and demons as well, kind of playing with it, and again using it as like entertainment or for fun. It even talks about in the letter how one of the demons says, as long as a human continues to believe that the devil is just a skinny little man dressed in red carrying a pitchfork, if that's our only conception of what the devil is, then they're in pretty good shape. Something else that came to mind for me is when I think about people that are the magician type that believe that little green men could come from Mars and invade Earth, that seems totally plausible to them. But the fact that God could send his son to Earth to save us, that just seems way outrageous for them. Like they can't believe that. That's just unbelievable. But yet they think little green men could come here. So I don't know. But anyway, but I digress on that. Let me get back on track. So the demons, again, like it if we're a magician thinking. It's even better if we're both. If we're a materialist magician, they like that. So that's what this one's talking about here. Let's see. One last thing that came up I thought was interesting in this letter too. Lewis also talks about the evil payoffs was when we as believers engage in what he calls extreme devotion. This is where, and he uses the words, that we practice profound dedication, which is basically an overwhelming straight ahead, almost mindless way of following something, to the point that it takes us away from the real God, the real issues. So even church could fall into this profound dedication, or religion, anytime that we're thinking about anything other than God himself. And Lewis talks about here that when we're in this profound dedication to something other than God, it can breed things like hatred and pride, mutual admiration, which I thought was a pretty interesting term, cliches, all these things. And you know, these are things that the churches have been accused of harboring, sometimes correctly, that they have gotten so far into the cause that they forget, the God part. And so he kind of warns against that. And his last part in this letter talks about, he says, in extreme devotion, the cause becomes our sponsor. And then I'm going to quote here, and meetings, pamphlets, policies, movements, causes, and crusades matter more to us when we get in that mode of extreme devotion than prayers and sacraments and charity. So I always say there's some ouches. There would be one right there, to stop and think about, am I more dedicated to the cause, the church, the denomination, whatever that might be to you, more so than I am to the work of God and trying to be Christ-like and live it every day. So I thought that was a pretty interesting one. And again, the Materialist Magician is definitely a concept. If you're into Lewis and want to study more, is a big concept in his writings. So there's the end of 7. Keep reading, hang in there. I'm gonna hang in, and I'm learning, and I'm actually finding even now that sometimes I will think of something I've read as something occurs maybe during the work week or something I hear on the news or whatever. So it's sticking, it's getting in there. So I hope that it is for you too. All right, hang in.